So I've been having a really hard time. I've tried to record this video a bunch of different times. I've basically been at it for a couple hours where I've been diving into the text and trying to answer this question. And, you saw the title, you saw the thumbnail. This question, did David rape Bathsheba? And it's a really hard topic to tackle. And I've tried a bunch of different ways to deal with it. And I do think it's important and I want to talk about it. But I decided to maybe try this one more time where I'm as simple and quick as possible, where I don't have a 30-minute video basically. Did David rape Bathsheba? If you're triggered by that, maybe you've had some trauma in your past, I'd encourage you, maybe this isn't the video for you. I don't want you to be hurt. I want you to be encouraged. So maybe a different video on my channel would be more helpful for you, or maybe just a different video. That being said, I do think it's important because not just of understanding what happened in the Bible, that's important, but also because I believe that the way that we talk about it and maybe some of the words that we use do shape a little bit about the culture of just our spheres of influence. So whether you're a pastor of a local church, maybe a Sunday school teacher, Bible study leader, or maybe you just have family and friends who have been through similar situations, I want you to know that how you talk about this narrative matters. So, did David rape Bathsheba? I do believe that David did, in fact, rape Bathsheba. That's my interpretation of 2 Samuel chapter 11. I look at things like David being in the wrong place. He was supposed to be off at war. He wasn't at war. He was in Jerusalem. He's up on the roof. What's he doing on the roof? It's not just like a porch. That's not the word that's used. It talks about a great height. What is he doing at a great height in the middle of the night when he was supposed to be sleeping? So he's not where he's supposed to be. He's on the roof. He looks at a naked woman as she's bathing. And instead of just being like, whoa, that's awkward, I'm so sorry I saw that, none of that, he actually pursues her. He inquires about her. He sends messengers to go and get her once he knows all the information. He knows that this is Bathsheba, that her husband is Uriah, that Uriah is off at war where David was supposed to be, but he's not. And he knows all that information and he still brings her. It says that he sent messengers to get her. So it's not a summoning for a meeting. It is a taken kind of scenario where Bathsheba is taken to the king and he sleeps with her. And it says then after that she went home and the bath that she was having, that bath was to purify her uncleanness. What that means is that it was her time of the month. It was her period. And during a woman's period, there was a certain amount of time where ceremonially she was considered unclean. And so that bath that she was having was at the end of her period. And so she was basically getting clean physically and ceremonially. And that's when David took her as his own and slept with her. So basically what I'm saying is all the action that we see in the text, and I had a much longer video where I broke apart all of this. Maybe I'll upload that someday, but I just think it's important to just come out and just say it quickly, is that yes, I do believe that David took all the action in that passage. We don't see any consent given by Bathsheba, anything that would indicate that she has any action in it. All the action is from David, and all the action that David takes is sinful. And then yes, he does sleep with her, and there's a child, and then he tries to cover it up, and he tries to get Uriah drunk, and he's still, even drunk Uriah has more moral fiber than sober David, and still he's thinking to himself, my brothers are off at war, I'm not going to go home, I'm not going to sleep with my wife, they don't get to, why should I? And so David kills him. And David becomes a murderer. And so I think it's interesting that some people who would come to different conclusions, if you come to a different conclusion on that passage, I want you to know that I think that's okay. I don't think that it's a litmus test on how well you exegete Scripture. I don't think that it is some kind of orthodoxy check or anything like that. But there are some people, and this is why I think it's important and why I wanted to make a video and why I decided to just try to do it in a more quick format than what I was doing before, where I had like 45 minutes talking about this passage. But why I believe that it's important is because there are a lot of pastors, a lot of people who are teaching, who have an audience, who have said some really awful things about Bathsheba. And all that we see, the action that Bathsheba takes in that passage in 2 Samuel chapter 11 is that she takes a bath and she mourns her husband. She isn't relieved. She isn't relieved that her husband is dead, so her sin won't be found out. She mourns her husband. She grieves. That's the actions that take place for Bathsheba. And a lot of pastors have looked at that passage and they've said all kinds of things about how, Bathsheba, what was she doing? Bathing on the roof. Well, we don't actually see that in the passage. All that we see is that David is at a great height, and so he can see her. Wherever she is bathing on her property, he can see that, and then he takes action. She is not a temptress. We don't see that in the passage at all. We actually see zero action from her. All the action is about David. Him being up on the roof, looking at her in the night as she bathes, going and getting the information, getting her, having sex with her. Even the word choice that they use there in the Old Testament, it says that he laid with her, not laid together. But we see again just David having the action there. David then deceives. He comes up with this plan, tries to get Uriah drunk, murder, all of that. Every action is on David. And then the conclusion with Nathan's parable is even vindicating for Bathsheba, because the prophet uses this idea of an innocent lamb to depict Bathsheba. I don't think that's the word choice that the prophet would have used if she was an adulterous woman. I think that there would be other words that he would use to get David's attention over his sin, if it was just that. But if you don't believe that, if you're just like, no, I do think it was consensual and that it was just an affair, I think that's an okay interpretation of the passage. Don't get me wrong. But if you start putting on all like the action and you start saying that it was on Bathsheba, that she wanted it, that she deserved it, and that you try to like vindicate David in some way by taking away some of the aspects of what he did in the passage and putting it on Bathsheba, what you're communicating to your audience, to the people listening to you, to victims who most certainly are listening to you. If you look at any stats, you would know that every church has victims of sexual abuse in the congregation who are listening. If your church is more than 7 or 8 years old, I can guarantee you that it's happened in your church. And even if you're younger than that, your church plant, I can guarantee you that it's happened to people who are involved in that church plant, maybe not at your church, but in your church. That has happened. We see it all the time. It's not rare, unfortunately. And so when you start saying that Bathsheba was all these different names, or that she was a temptress, or you start putting all these actions on her, what you're saying to a victim listening is that they're not going to be heard. They're not going to be believed, most likely. And maybe you're listening to that and saying that's not fair. I would never say that. I want victims to feel like they can be trusted. Well, then you need to be very careful when it comes to this passage and passages like it, like with Abraham and Hagar. I could do another hour-long video about that situation. But if you start talking about these kinds of scenarios and you start putting undue willingness an activity on the woman in these instances where this abuse has happened, then what you're saying to a victim is that they're not going to be heard. And I hope that that really bothers you. And I hope that maybe that stirs you to talk about this passage and other passages like it a little bit differently, and to come at it at a different angle to where you can get your point across in saying maybe you do believe that it was consensual, that it was an affair. That's fine. But we need to be very careful about the words that we use to describe this scenario, the actions, that we're not putting on actions that aren't in the text, but that we're clearly exegeting Scripture and not just saying, well, she was a temptress, she wanted it, she deserved it, all those different kinds of things, because that person listening is just hearing, my abuser is going to be given more credit than I am. My abuser is going to be believed, not me. And hopefully that's not the case in our churches. Hopefully that's not the case in your sphere of influence, wherever you're at, whether you're just talking to family and friends, Bible study, Sunday school, church, whatever it might be. Let's be safe places where we talk about these things with care and concern, and not just, what we've heard someone else say. Let's study the text for ourselves and make sure, do we have the story right? Do we understand the narrative? Or are we just saying things that have maybe been said in front of us and we're just rehearsing that? Because I think that's where a lot of these mistakes get made. I don't know. Maybe I'll post the other video instead of this one. If you're watching this, that means that I decided to post this quick edition of this video rather than the really long one. And if you're watching this, I'd encourage you to like this video if you did. I never want likes just because I posted a video. But if you actually liked this video, please hit that button. If you like this kind of content where I talk about these kind of topics and I dive a little bit into Scripture, I know I try to be very quick in this, but if you like that, subscribe to the channel because I do it a lot. Maybe watch one of my Marking Up the Word videos. Hopefully I'll be able to post one of those later on in the week, where we're still going to be moving our way through Romans chapter 6. But until the next video, let's make sure that we're being safe places. And if you're a victim, maybe you've had some trauma, and even as you're watching this video, you just kind of relived it. I want you to know that I do believe that God has placed in your life people who can be trusted. So find them, reach out to them and say, this has happened to me, or this is happening to you. And I do believe that God is going to send you help through that. Maybe it's your pastor, maybe it's a spiritual leader in the church, maybe it's a family member. But I do believe that God has placed those places of refuge in your life. And I earnestly pray that you can get the help that you need. I'll see you in the next video.